It is incredibly easy to overreact to week one, so we're going to try not to do that today. We're going to stick to more overarching league-wide trends that we noticed in all the week one games. For starters, offensive lines right now are not very good. There's not a lot of depth along the offensive line overall, like league-wide. So, I mean, you got teams taking injuries like Cleveland and like even LA. Like Matt Stafford did what he could, but he still got the shit beat out of him. There's just not enough good offensive linemen to go around. So that's caused a massive issue, I would say, for a good chunk of the league. We had 33 touchdown passes as of Monday morning going into the Monday night game compared to, say, 61 touchdown passes in both 2019 and 2021 in week one. So offense is down. Offense is really, really, really down. If you're sitting in the top 5 and you have the choice between taking a wide receiver and Joe Alt, not to bring the Chargers back into this, Joe Alt was probably the right selection. So if you have a chance to get a good offensive lineman, do it, because most teams, like, they're struggling right now. They can't block anybody.
He held up incredibly well versus Maxx Crosby, which is obviously, there were these assignments all over the league, and you see it every year. Rookies like, welcome to the league, Rook. Here's one of the best players you're ever going to face in your entire life as your first assignment. And Joe Alt had that with Maxx Crosby. And he held up in pass protection really well. Like,
0 pressures allowed on 11 true dropbacks, by the way.
He did not. Yes, he got his hands on him. He moved him across on inside counter. He was able to counter power. It was an impressive performance for rookie. So yeah, looks like Joe Alt's going to be just fine. And I'm with you that if you can get sort of verified offensive line talent at the top and your team is struggling in the way that a lot of teams that we're talking about are, that is a wise selection. Speaking of things that teams did in the offseason, we talked about it all offseason in our preview series, and we talk about a lot of these things on paper, right? Oh, that addition looks really good on paper. Well, several teams' patches from free agency and the draft and really the coaching cycle did make an instant impact. They're not just on paper anymore, they're on turf. And there's a few highlight examples. Joe Mixon's the first one I'm going to bring up. Doubled the Texans' average rush from last year in his first game. Like, pretty much the same offensive line in Houston. Add a different running back, you're getting twice as many yards per carry. That is a sizable upgrade for an offense that was already pretty good. We already talked about the Titans. I'm going to talk about the other side of the Titans line, the defensive line, T'Vondre Sweat. If you take away Caleb's scrambles, DJ Moore's sweep, really look at runs around the line, the Titans, with Sweat and Simmons, let's not forget that Jeffrey Simmons still exists because he's still pretty damn good.
He's kind of hard to forget.
Yeah, but the pairing of them held the Bears to 55 yards at about 3.4 yards per carry, which is around where Houston was rushing last year, by the way. So T'Vondre Sweat, Adam with a paired superstar, they're not going to have to worry about that inside pairing, and teams are going to have a real trouble running against the Titans. I would, again, I'm with you, caution people not to overreact to week one. And when everybody goes, oh, the Bears can't run the ball, well, they're not going to be facing T'Vondre Sweat.
I do want to piggyback on the Mixon thing, by the way.
Yeah.
The Texans had 40 minutes of time of possession in that game. That was a remarkable, suffocating performance. And again, the Texans have invested a lot in their offensive line over the years. They're one of the few teams that I don't think has, huge holes on the offensive line. They've had some guys underperform, like they're trying to bring Kenyon Green along and have him, play up to the potential when they drafted him. They invested in Juice Scruggs, who was injured a lot. Howard's had injuries. Even Tunsil's been banged up here and there. But they've invested a lot in the offensive line, and it paid off. But to your point, the fact that Mixon can get 2 to 3 extra yards out of every single carry by either running through people or just making people take, disadvantageous angles on him. And I love Devin Singletary. I really do, but he's not Joe Mixon. And nope. Joe Mixon is just so remarkably gifted, especially for a 220-plus pound running back, of making you take a bad angle where he can just get those extra 2 yards. And those add up, especially when you get 30 carries like he did. They would not have won that game without him because he was just this maniacally efficient machine, getting 6-7 yards over and over and over again, and setting CJ Stroud up for success. That was a really, really encouraging performance, and I haven't seen a Texans run game like that in since the prime Arian days, probably.
As if they needed more help on the offensive side, but they sure did get it. But some other examples that we saw: Detroit revamping basically their entire secondary. We talked about this in summer. Hey, they were getting destroyed. They drafted a bunch of corners. They brought in some free agents, and they had Stafford making uncharacteristic mistakes early on in that game and throughout most of it. They got him to throw a pick in the end zone. Should have had another one out in the field. Last year, Stafford shreds that secondary, and this year they held him to 1 TD until 4:30 to go left in the game. That is a major upgrade. Again, a team that needed help. We thought they got it. Sure looks like against one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, they did really well. Then there were the coaching additions. We talked about Mike Mack a ton. We talked about the Chargers coaching change. We talked about a bunch of different coordinators around the league that came in, and many of those paid dividends on week one. We saw a very different Seahawks team up at Seattle. That defense was aggressive, opportunistic, multiple, hard to read, all the things we thought it was going to be. Forced a bunch of turnovers and kept Seattle in that game. So it's really cool when the moves work. Again, we're not going to overreact and say, it's fixed. They're good for the entire season. It's week one, but some obvious dividends on week one that help teams win games.
I would even pull it back to the Friday game with Philly. Kellen Moore.
Yes.
That was... And again, I don't want to dogpile too much on previous Eagles coaches, but that just looked like a different team offensively. Like, they used motion, like they had answers for the blitz, and it sounds like, that's just basic stuff. Yeah, that's the point. That's basic stuff. They didn't have the basics down at all last year. And so, Philly, even just beyond the whole Saquon addition, and obviously he's super dynamic and proved to be a massive addition for them in the first game, but just the actual structure of the offense, it just made sense. So, sometimes you're just one good coach away. And for so many teams out there, I wonder, I wonder what they would look like if they just hired the right guy, even when they already have the players in place and the rosters there. If they just hire the right guy, what would it look like? And I know as a Chicago fan, you're like, yeah, what if we hired Mike McDonald?
No, I wasn't even thinking about
24
that. I wasn't even thinking about that, although, yes, that was my choice. And I think, again, we're not going to overreact to week one on either side. We'll see how it plays out. But teams like the Patriots, I saw our buddy Taylor Kyle saying, it looks like the offense makes sense. I don't love all of it, but this seems like a well laid out plan. I can live with this. And a lot of Eagles fans were saying the same thing. And we're going to see that with coaching changes around the league as people go, yeah, if we had this last year, ... And we'll see how it plays out over 16 weeks, 17 weeks left. Sorry.
By the way, speaking of that Bengals game, we brought up in the preseason briefly that Cincinnati's run defense was going to be an issue.
Well,
yeah, it's an issue. That's going to be a problem for them. If you don't think Arthur Smith is salivating at running the ball 45 times against this Bengals front, they're not good. They can rush the passer, they cannot stop the run. So we'll see how that ends up for them. My first kind of overarching week one takeaway: the sport has fundamentally changed with this kickoff structure adjustment. And I think no game was a better example than the Buffalo-Arizona game. Early, and I'm talking really, really early, Codrington, who's a rookie in Buffalo, took one for 53 yards. Now, they ended up fumbling on the drive, but he got a 53-yard return to set them up in good position. And literally for the entire rest of the game, it was touchback. To start the third quarter, they did try to do one of those kind of you almost want to call it a long onside kick or a skip kick. I don't even know what the terminology is for it, where you try to skip it right at the 20-yard line, have it land in the zone. But if you look at it from the end zone angle, It almost looks like a Beckham penalty kick. It kind of like it kind of like barrels and then it skips at the 20 and it's really hard to pick up. And like that's what teams are trying to master is getting that long squib down. Again, I don't have a term for it. They tried it once and they didn't hit it inside the 20, so Buffalo started at the 40. But the entire rest of the game after that Codrington return, they're like, screw it. Like, we'll just let them start at 30. Just touchback. They're just booting it. And that changes the game. Like, that completely changes the game. Late in the game, when they were down 31-20, Arizona popped a 96-yarder with DJ Dallas for a score, and then they got the 2-point conversion. So all of a sudden, and it was like literally 9 minutes left. You know, you're up by 2 possessions, and then you're in the fight of your life in a field goal game with 8 minutes to go against Kyler Murray. So I think that kickoff, not just for the fact that we're getting more kickoffs, it was like a 70 to 80% return rate for week 1. It's not just the fact that we're getting more returns, it's the fact that those returns can now result in substantive plays and points and completely flipping games on their head that, you know, they're one step away from garbage time, and now all of a sudden it's a field goal game. Like, that's going to happen more and more and more and more and more. And so I think if you don't have good special teams now, and this has always been true, like you think back to those mid-2000s Chargers teams with the number 1 offense, number 1 defense, number 32 special teams missed the playoffs. So it's always been true, but I think now more than ever, if you don't have a good kick return and kick cover unit, you're screwed. Like, you're screwed. Like, that can be worth a 7-point swing at the drop of a hat. Buffalo was in control of that game and damn near lost it because of that. So, like, we're going to see more of it. I'd be willing to bet somewhere in the playoffs, maybe even in the Super Bowl, like this kickoff structure will somehow result in like a defining play of the season because it's too dynamic not to.
And teams in the NFL are risk averse. And we saw a lot of teams saying, screw it right away, and just saying, start them at the 30, blast that thing out of the end zone. Like, do not give them a shot, because it reminds me of when you faced a really dynamic returner. And there have been many throughout
like Hester.
the NFL.
Yeah.
Hester for sure. Even prime Josh Cribbs got some of that treatment. Like when he was popping a couple and he goes on a hot streak and he's had 3 or 4 good returns inside of a month, comes up against a team where maybe they're down some players. They've got some fresh guys off the practice squad on special teams. And the special teams coordinator is like, I don't want to lose my job this week. Do not kick it to him. Like, I don't care what you got to do. I'll take anything. And in this particular dynamic kickoff, that is kick it into or through the end zone. Like, do not let them have a chance, because I don't want to be the guy with my head on the block when we were, sporting a 6-point lead and now we're a point behind and the head coach is just, burning holes through me with laser eyes because I kicked to blank and he got through on a good block. We also started to see some of the stuff on the dynamic kickoff that we predicted was going to come, but nobody wanted to show during the preseason. We actually got a team that almost ran counter. It was the Bears. They brought a guy all the way from the other side as a kick out block across the formation. And everybody's been saying, that's what it's going to look like. We said that. It's going to look like a run play. They finally did it. They weren't willing to do it in the preseason. I'm sure they did it in the closed practices, not the public practices. And they finally did it. And we're going to see more teams try more of that stuff and go, hey, these concepts work. And that, again, is going to lead to the search for they've always looked for dynamic athletes as returners, but dynamic athletes in a different way who can complete those plays and give your team a big advantage. We're going to see the push and pull of that. Some teams, again, are just going to say, forget it. We don't want to play. Kick the ball out of the end zone. Other teams are going to say, hey, if they kick it to us, we can get one here. They're going to hide stuff. They're going to save stuff. It's going to be rivalry games and, times when they really need it. I guarantee Kansas City's got Dave Tobe like in the lab right now. And Andy's going, hey, going to give you a couple of shots this year. Have them ready.
Again, we're recording this before the Monday night game. I'm really fascinated to see if they let Brees be a kick returner today, because if there's anybody on that roster other than Malachi Corley, who I think could could probably flip the game all by himself on just one of those if they're willing to even kick it to him. It's probably him. All right, I don't want to hog the time here too much. So why don't you give me your first overarching narrative observation, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, my first one was about the patches and the rookies. My second one is that two teams in the NFL have real issues at QB. So while we're saying don't panic about week one, this isn't just week one. This is a continuation of issues from last year. And those two teams are the Browns and the Giants. They were not good. And I will also throw in a maybe. Again, I'm not willing to jump on the wagon fully on this one. The Panthers might have a problem. We'll see. Again, Canales is new in the role.
The Panthers might have a problem.
Canales is new in the role. I'm not going to throw dirt on Bryce after 1 week with a new head coach. That's silly. But if you want to talk about watch list candidates, oh yeah, he's right there. Obviously, we know he wasn't good as a rookie. We know what the reasons were for that. We talked about it extensively during the offseason preview series. We also talked about how we thought Canales would fix a lot of that. Week one was a big balloon deflating. They've got a lot of work to do. The other two teams that I really want to focus on, because we do have a lot of data. We didn't have turnover in the coaching staffs. Deshaun Watson, under 170 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. The team scored 17 total points. Daniel Jones, just over 50% completions, under 190 yards, 2 picks, and his team scored 6 points total for the game. 17 points and 6 points.
That still felt high.
Yeah. And well, I think a lot of Giants fans probably were high during the game yesterday because there's nothing else to do. Like, they marched into this, both of these teams. I don't want to stress this. This is not an accident. This is not somebody got hurt. This is not, oh, we thought we were going to pay our star quarterback and then he got signed away and we had to scramble. These teams are not unprepared for this. Both of these teams gave these guys relatively big money contracts. Obviously not the same money. They marched into this season knowing these guys were the starters and not doing anything about it. And if this continues, again, this is for both of these guys a continuation of their play from last season. This is not a vast drop off from where their production was a year ago. They both struggled then. They both struggled mightily in week one. We all know famously that the Browns are as locked in as they can be, and they're making it worse. They're borrowing from that bank and making the eventual cut more expensive. The Giants, I think, are just treading water. Mara gave them the opportunity to go get a quarterback. They did not. And now they are just basically waiting for the draft. Our buddy Adam, 5 Points Vids, put up a thing and said, all right, draft's in Green Bay, let's go on week one. Like, that is the state of the Giants fan mentality right now. And I don't blame them, because not only does it not look good, there's not a lot of hope it's going to turn around. These guys are not young players. They do not have fresh offensive systems. They are what they are at this point. They are known knowns. And that reality for both those teams, Cleveland and New York Giants, is not good right now.
Yes, I had this as one of my points as well. So it's good overlap. B, I kind of want to address Giants and Browns fans directly here. You are under no obligation as a fan to embrace or defend mediocrity. You don't have to do that. And I remember on this show last year, every time we brought up, like, hey, Deshaun Watson kind of sucks. We would get inundated with these comments of like, well, it's because of A or B or so-and-so was out. And it's like, guys, we have fucking eyes. Like, you don't have to do this. You don't have to defend mediocrity. It is not your job as a fan to just sit there and take this. And I don't blame them. Like, I get it. I did it too. Like, once upon a time, I defended Brock Osweiler vehemently because my psyche as a fan just couldn't handle the fact that we gave him, a massive deal at the time, which I think was only like $16 million a year. It's like 55. But like, I couldn't handle the thought as a fan of like, oh, maybe we screwed up, right? So I did the same thing that Giants fans did with Daniel Jones of like, well, if he just had weapons or an offensive line or, you know, the hand of God on his shoulder every single play, he'd be fine. I did it. I get it. You don't have to. Like, I think maturing is realizing that you as a fan are under no obligation to defend bullshit, let alone, you know, when you have evidence presented to you, just completely ignore it. And I think for those fans, what it really comes down to is people don't like having their time wasted. And we only get 17 of these every single year. We get 17 Sundays where we could sit back, we could watch our favorite team. You know, we have memories, you know, watching these teams with our dad growing up, our family. You know, we have so much of our life poured into these teams, these organizations. We have strong emotional ties to these organizations, and we don't want to believe that those organizations are wasting our time, that they are wasting these 17 Sundays we get every year. And so we lie to ourselves. We convince ourselves it's going to be okay. We convince ourselves, no, this is a good deal. Oh, they converted Deshaun's salary because they can do the rollover cap and the salary cap's going up so much next year that they're going to be totally fine. No, they're fucking not. Like, they're not. It's a $73 million cap hit the next 2 years. The only way they were going to be fine, and this was the bet they made when they first did the deal, they assumed he was going to be good enough to extend because they were going to do an extension in order to alleviate that cap hit. And the question I asked was like, well, what if he's not good enough to extend? And it's like, oh, well, then they're screwed. Yeah, they're screwed. Like, they got nothing else. They can't do anything. Like, they're locked in. They are locked in. Now, the Daniel Jones deal, a lot more maneuverable. Like, they can get out of that after this year. So the Giants are in a much better spot. Well, the Giants are in a much easier spot in order to wipe the slate clean if they want to. They're in a better spot. But even then, you know, when we were telling Giants fans, like, guys, this is not a good idea to tie your mental well-being to this quarterback. And now we're here. Now we're here. Like, they had an opportunity, and I get it. Like, they tried to trade it for Drake May, and it didn't work out. They had an opportunity still to move down a couple spots. Take J.J. McCarthy, take Penix, take whoever. Because literally any of those top 6 quarterbacks was going to be an upgrade. Like, they had a chance to do it. And then you come back in the second round, you get a receiver then. Like, there was A.D. Mitchell available at the top of the second round. You're telling me that you wouldn't rather have paired McCarthy or Penix with A.D. Mitchell as your 1-2 punch right now? Like, you're telling me you wouldn't rather have that right now? I get it, Malik Neighbors is dynamic, but look who's throwing him the ball. So I guess my overall point is I'm sympathetic to these fan bases because I've done the same thing. I get where they're at. They don't want to feel like the next 6 months of their life is going to be miserable. But that doesn't mean that you need to defend the organization that is doing this to you. You don't need to accept this shit. Like, it's not good for you to do that. So just acknowledge the team screwed up. They screwed up, and people are probably going to pay with that with their jobs, or pay for that with their jobs. And as much as I love Dable, like, I do think that Dable is very good at kind of making chicken salad out of chicken shit. Like, how do you go on with this? You can't. It's hopeless. I don't know what else to say. It's just hopeless.
That's the part that hurts the most being a fan, is when you are a fan of a team and from very early on, in this case, as early as it gets, week 1, you are hopeless about your situation. You do not believe that there is a likelihood that it is going to substantively improve for the rest of the season, and therefore you are already looking towards things like the draft. And what I keep thinking about with these teams, and maybe eventually Carolina, we'll see, is the baseball stat WAR, wins above replacement, right? It's applied to players as they look at them in free agency as a value. Like, if you took X player, median player off the street, how many extra wins do you get with the player that you're looking at? And I wonder how many games either of these teams would win with a random QB off the street that was available to cut down. Like, let's say
you
Tyler
mean like
Huntley.
Joe Flacco?
No, I mean like Tyler Huntley, who was available, who did get cut, who did go back to the Ravens. And if you put Tyler Huntley on the Browns as the starter or on the Giants throwing to Malik Neighbors, are you more hopeful? Like it's like hope above replacement, not wins above replacement, right? Are you going to win some more games? Probably. Are you going to have more engaged fans who are going to enjoy their experience more and have, a better shot at taking some of those outside matchups where you probably shouldn't win, but you might because it's the NFL? I think you do. And when you're in that position as an NFL team, that's pretty much the bottom of the barrel. When you can grab a guy off the street and do better than the guy you're paying a lot of money to lead your franchise, you're in dire straits.
My God, even Rattler. Like, Rattler didn't go to the 5th round.
Yep.
And there's a lot of people that thought he was going to be a day 2 guy. Even if you want to go, Malik Neighbors, like, let's get a dynamic weapon, and then, we'll figure out something in the 2nd round. We'll take the best player available. Okay, Newbin's there. We need a safety. He's a good safety. Okay, cool. Like, I get it. But going into that draft, knowing, okay, we didn't get a quarterback in the 1st round. We still have Daniel Jones. We still know this isn't good. Rattler was there for 5 rounds. And you have a bad quarterback situation. The Saints did the responsible thing. Like, God bless them. They did. Where it's like, okay, we got Derek Carr, and he's fine, but we're still not sure. Let's take a shot on Rattler, right? And all of a sudden, Rattler has a great offseason. There's people in that building that legitimately think he might, I don't want to say take the job, but
let's just say be the starter by the end of the season.
Yes. But they have that option as an organization. Like, they have that option. And keep in mind, the Saints are in a similar cap situation to the Browns, where it's like $100 billion over the cap going into next March. And they're going to do their normal, Mickey Loomis magic eraser thing. But the fact that they potentially might have something in Rattler there where they can get adequate quarterback play. Again, we're just hoping for adequate out of a dirt cheap contract means that the Saints are in a pretty decent position going forward, because if DC doesn't work out, they still have an option that's cheap. Can't say the same for the Giants. Can't say the same for the Browns. Can't say the same for a few other teams. And again, Bryce, I have a soft spot for Bryce, and you know that because I've been watching him longer than pretty much anybody. But that was
we didn't see it in week 1. Let's put it that way. But
that was
it's a full change of offseason terminology, head coach, what he's being asked to do. A lot of change in front of him on the line as well. Like, there's a lot of moving parts. It's week 1. That's a different situation. If we're still looking at the same thing in 6 or 7 weeks and the needle hasn't moved, we haven't seen any flashes, we haven't seen, steady, slow improvement, that's still possible with a year 2 player. Deshaun Watson, not a spring chicken. Daniel Jones, been in the league a long time. Like, we're not going to see that from them. We are not going to see big jumps from them. Bryce could work his way back to even, I think. I think that's a possibly reasonable explanation. We'll see. I'm not saying it's going to happen. If it doesn't happen in the first half of the season, it's probably not going to happen, right? We need to see some movement, but we still might. With the other 2, we're not going to, and that's where the hopelessness sets in.
Well, I do want to take the opportunity to transition to a hopeful segment, at least. We don't like to entirely be negative on the show. In fact, we don't enjoy being negative at all in this show, but to kind of bring it back to something positive, we talked about this game a little bit earlier. Texans-Colts. Texans, extraordinarily efficient machine offensively. It was the Joe Mixon show, as well as, not even some, like 4 to 5 plays throughout the game where it's like, okay, yeah, CJ Stroud, put the cape on, like, get us back on track, and then Joe Mixon will do the rest. There was like a 4th down he converted from his knees. There was the big shot to Nico. There was the late 3rd and 11 to ice the game to Nico. That was an unreal throw and an even better catch. That's kind of how the Texans, I think, are trying to build, where we're going to play good defense, we're going to run the ball, and we're going to have our ultra superstar quarterback just make 5 plays a game to keep us on the straight and level. That's what they did. And it resulted in 40 minutes of time possession. And yet, they barely won. And they barely won because you contrast that super efficient methodical machine with the unbelievable, explosive, game-changing power of Anthony Richardson. He went 9 of 19. Hold on, let me get the exact stat line. 9 of 19 for 212 yards and 2 touchdowns and a pick. He got 171 yards and both of those touchdowns on 3 throws. So the entire rest of the game, he completed 6 passes, and they were still right there in the end. And it wasn't overall a super pretty performance. I mean, there were some throws to A.D. Mitchell that he wants back that he just barely missed. Like, if Mitchell just had, like, go gadget arms, he would have had, like, 4 touchdowns in this game. And there was a couple throws that, quite honestly, were just not good. And yet, if you look at that ball that he uncorked to Alec Pierce, where there is no universe where that should have even been attempted, let alone completed. He is one of the only people that I think could even think about doing that, where you get a quarters look and you know you got a big post to a big receiver that runs 4-4-1, and you're like, hey, man, I just need him to split it, and I can get it there. And you saw both the Texans DBs as they were running, they're like, is he throwing that? Like, there's no, what the fuck? Like, you saw the progression in their head throughout the play where they're like, there is no way that ball is coming to me right now. And it shouldn't have, because if you look at him in the pocket, you know, right tackle gets collapsed. He kind of slips because the turf, there's something going on with the turf. Everybody was slipping and sliding all over. And he's like not even stepping into it. He's fading away to his left. He does that Aaron Rodgers foot pop, so he gets just an incredible amount of torque in his core, which is why Rodgers does that, by the way. Because it kind of like, well, I don't want to dive too deep into QB mechanics, but safe to say he did a Rodgers-ish type release in terms of how he handled his front foot and how he handled his core. And he launched that thing 65 yards through the air without even really getting a step into it, fading away to his left, leading the post to Alec Pierce. The DBs were stunned. I'm sure the press box, everybody in the press box was like, how is that even possible? The fans lost their mind because for so many years, you know, they were watching quarterbacks that just could not physically do that. And he did that 3 times. Like, he did that 3 times in that game where he let go of a ball that just did not make sense. And that's why they almost won. They had 20 minutes of time of possession and put up almost 30 points. Like, it's absurd what he can do. And once he figures out how to hit the layups and the Steph Curry threes from half court, good luck. Like, you're not going to have any answers at all against him. So I just want to put it out there. Anthony Richardson, he's on his way. He's not all the way there yet, but he's coming, folks. Like, you can see it. He's coming.
Right after he threw that first one to Alec Pierce, I put out a tweet that said Anthony Richardson ascending and put that clip in because we talked about it this offseason. We said if he stays healthy, which is what he was not able to do last year, you saw the flashes even in the 3/4 games that he played last year. They weren't quite as bright or as big as these, but they were there. There were the, oh my God, what was that throws? And this just took it to another level. This is what we were predicting, and it's going to be hard to look at. It's kind of like the sun. You got to look at it and look away. This is not traditional quarterback play. You are not going to see sustained, consistent, everything you want to see from the quarterback position from Anthony Richardson for a while. But occasionally you're going to have to get out your eclipse glasses because you're going to be staring directly at the sun when he lets it go. Whether it's, you know, physically at the sun because it's an arm punt that goes like 40 yards in the air and 60 yards down the field and nobody else on the planet could attempt it, or just because he rips it in between, you know, 3 defenders playing zone 30 yards down the field who were, you know, 2 or 3 yards away going, he can't get that in there before I get over there, can he? And then he does by a yard, and they're all like, damn, what do we do about that? I mean, that breaks zone defense rules because most people can't throw that ball. So I think Steichen is bought in, which is really important to have a head coach and a play caller who is like, all right, like, we're not going to play the time possession game. We're not going to grind it out. We are going to put up some mortar shots and change the game. And they did, and they're going to continue to. And like you said, when he can mesh the more normal pedestrian stuff, and you see that progression in quarterbacks as they become more savvy veterans and they have more experience and they make less of those mistakes, and he starts hitting some of those throws to AD. I DM'd you about 2 of those. I was like, man, he missed AD twice by a combined total of about 3 feet between the 2 throws. And if he'd hit those, they both would have been. So when he starts to sort of lay the brick and mortar together and have a foundation and can still uncork those game-changing bombs or take off and run for 60 and bounce defensive backs off like they're flies off a windshield, you're going to see a player that is among the elite in terms of changing a game in the NFL.
If you're in the AFC and you're watching all these quarterbacks, like let's say you're a GM in the AFC and you don't have one.
Yeah.
Right. And you're watching what Anthony Richardson did. You're watching what Stroud did. Obviously, you watch Mahomes, you watch Lamar, you watch Burrow, you watch Allen. How do you convince yourself that, like, oh, yeah, Kenny Pickett in the first round? Like, how do you honestly convince yourself that you can compete with that?
No.
Like, some of these GMs, man, like, I get it, but at the same time, it's like, if you don't have an alien, like, this is the Kaiju Conference, man. If you don't have one, you're toast. So do whatever you can to go get one. You don't have the option of just having like a plucky game manager, and we're gonna build the rest of the roster around. Like, no, dude, you can't do that. Not in the AFC. Get a Kaiju or get the fuck out. Like, that's it. That's all you can do.
Yeah, so my third trend that I saw around the league, and it's a very nice segue talking about AR and what he was able to do in Indianapolis, is speed still kills. This goes all the way back to Al Davis and even farther, Eric Coryell. And, chunk plays come from guys that can fly. We saw Xavier Worthy's first score in the Chiefs Thursday night game, and everybody was like, oh, yeah, the blocking was tremendous, but yeah, that's some zip. We all knew he had that. Tyreek Hill, 7 for 130 and a TD. Alec Pierce got unlocked by AR and Steichen. 3 catches, 125 yards, and a TD. Buck and a quarter off 3 grabs. Okay, that's what we hoped for when Alec Pierce came out, and we were like, great multi-sport athlete, really tall, really fast, can run the post. Got to have a guy that can throw it to him. Guess what? He has a guy that can throw it to him. A.J. Brown, we all knew about him, 5 for 119 and a TD. Jalen Waddle, the other speedster in Miami, 5 for 109. And Jameson Williams. I'm sorry. This is the victory lap part. 2 years. Took me 2 years.
I knew this was coming.
You knew it was coming.
Dude, as soon as I saw him take off, like, EJ's going to bring this up in the show. I guarantee it.
100%. Jameson Williams took us 2 years to see him exert his will over an NFL game. We saw him do it in college all the time. He was my wide receiver 1 coming out. Last night, he finally gets his, and I'm extremely glad for him and for the Lions, because this is an unlock for them. We talked about this during the offseason, but last night, 5 for 121 and a TD, 13 also added rushing. But this is the element that Ben Johnson and the Lions haven't had, and Ben Johnson is leaning in, and that should scare the shit out of the rest of the NFC, because he has not had this. He has not had the speedster down the middle, unlock, gonna break your defense, gonna pop the top off your coverage regularly threat that was viable. He had it sometimes, and it was kind of like a flickering fuse, right? That dynamite might blow up, but teams were able to kind of say, hey, the Lions have enough other weapons. We can focus on them. If we lock them down, we can play with them. This is the kind of game-changing element. Somebody put it up on Twitter. This is the Air Johnson offense, right? And Ben is leaning in to saying, oh, I have all that other stuff. Still, none of that other stuff went away. We still have all those other weapons that took us all the way last year. And now we've got this. And if you don't think that scares defensive coordinators around, certainly the NFC, but really around the league, you're wrong, because it's like you were already really good and really sound. You upgraded your defense, and now you've got a guy that can score in one play. Oh, crap.
And yet, he says, with a dramatic pause, when it really came down to it, you know what really impressed me about the Lions offense? when they got to overtime after not giving the ball to David Montgomery the entire fourth quarter.
That's right.
They're like, oh, wait, we're Detroit. And we have a toughness mindset that very few organizations have. Why are we not just playing grown man football? Like, we can play grown man football anytime we want to. We're the freaking Lions. And I loved that when push came to shove and they really, really had to, they just leaned on him. Like, they sensed the Rams were tired. I mean, everybody was gassed by the end of that game, but they knew they were tired. They knew it was a very young defense. So, like, screw it. Like, we have 1,500 pounds, 1,600 pounds in this offensive line and David Montgomery. Let's just run the ball over and over and over again and end this damn thing. And they did. It was run, 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 quick pass for 10 yards, run, 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 game over. And I think the fact that they can do all the fun Jameson Williams stuff, you know, the explosive plays, or they could put the big boy pants on and run it 7 out of 8 plays to ice the game. That is a versatility, or rather that is a type of versatility that I don't think very many other teams in the NFL have, where they can do both. It means they can keep up in a shootout. It means that if they're in just a grinded out slobber knocker like they were against the Rams, they can end it there. They can either land a big hook or they can win with body blows. It's uncommon to be able to do both. So I think the Lions have a real shot this year for that reason. Plus, oh, by the way, they got better corners, like you mentioned at the top of the show. And they had a very tough assignment last night handling that Rams receiving core, and I thought they did about as well as they possibly could for a young secondary. So, yeah, Detroit, still good. Shocker. Who knew?
And they're also really good in the mid-range, right? That's, you want to talk about rarity. Yes, we now have the long bombs, which are, you know, the big one-punch knockouts. I loved not only the fact that they sort of pressed the life out of the Rams when they felt that they were tired, but the way that they did it, they weren't very variable in that drive. It wasn't like, oh, we're gonna mix up thunder and lightning with Gibbs and Montgomery, and we're gonna, you know, a bunch of window. Nope. They lined up with Montgomery,
Montgomery
on them. They were basically saying, "Here we come, stand up, like toe to toe, let's go. We're not gonna hide this. You know it's coming. You get to try and stop it, and you can't." And they did it. But if they find some team that in some way is very good against both of those things, they're one of the best teams in the mid-range too. If you want to talk about a tactician as a boxer, they got Amon-Ra St. Brown. They got Laporta. They can do, you know, Gibbs as a receiver or a runner. Like, they are strong sort of at all three levels. And as a defensive coordinator, you know, going up against Ben Johnson at this point, you're kind of throwing your hands up and saying, pick your poison. We're going to die one way or another. We're just going to try and pick the way that we die. That's about the only luxury that you have against the Lions offense.
While we're on the topic of the Lions, by the way, Aidan Hutchinson.
Woo-hoo.
I mean, you were getting him at like 14-1 for Defensive Player of the Year. 10 pressures last night.
Yeah.
Like 10 pressures.
And
in
quick.
one game. That the only other player who did that, by the way, I think was Micah, who had an unreal performance in his own right. But like, Aiden's in that category of edge rusher with Myles Garrett and Watt and Micah and Crosby and all them. Like, he is in that group. He is somebody who very easily could be on the short list for Defensive Player of the Year this year. And he got help. This is the best defensive line, I think, overall in terms of talent that Detroit's had in the Dan Campbell era. So, yeah, he's off to a flying start so far.
He was a handful to deal with, and I think pressures are not all created equal. One of the things we saw with this reduced scoring that you talked about at the top of the show was there was a lot of power rushes yesterday. It was not just speed. It was not just dips and rips around the edge. There was a lot of bull rushes, long arms, just straight up power rushing. And you do need to have a balance between both. But the most effective rushers have to get there very quickly because all offenses are trying to get the ball out very quickly. And Hutchinson won quickly many times. He was directly in Stafford's face, and that is very hard to deal with off the edge. It is also rare. Like, again, you can get a good, strong power rusher, and you probably need one to crush the pocket. But getting guys that can win consistently and win quickly, it's like finding good quarterbacks. It just doesn't happen all that often. And Detroit has gold in Hutchinson because they have that combination.
I mentioned, by the way, only 2 players had 10 plus pressures yesterday, Parsons and Hutchinson. Parsons had 11, Hutchinson had 10. You know who had 9? Believe it or not? Boye Mafe. Are we finally in the era of Boye Mafe, EJ? Is this our defensive Jameson Williams?
That's right.
No,
you see what
no.
DJ said? I am buying all the Boye Mafe stock I can get right now. He is on the edge of becoming a superstar. And this is some of the Mike Mack effect or maximization. See what I did there? Maximization. Anyways, he's got great talent. He's got a lot of talent in Seattle that John Schneider has assembled that we really liked coming out in the draft. And I think Mafe is first because he was farther along. And then some other guys that came after him that we really liked are also going to get their star turn because that's the way that Ravens system works. It's not about the one guy. It was never about, having Myles Garrett. It was about 4 or 5 guys that could win in different ways and did every week and just made it very, very difficult to deal with. Mafe had a very good game when we see Nwosu come back. He was already playing at a high level. I think he is going to continue that trend. Then we're going to see some other guys chip in because that's always the way it goes. It's not always the name guys in that defense. They find a strength and they push on it. But Mafe, look, the reason we loved him coming out, he was uber athletic. He could play out on the edge. He was fast enough to get out to the boundary with, backs going to the flat and tight ends hitting little flat outs to the sideline. And he can rush with power. He's quick enough. Like he has all the tools and he hadn't put it together. And yesterday it started to look like he put it all together. And again, kind of like we said about Anthony Richardson, when he can do the mundane things and the spectacular things, look out. He is going to be considered among, I think, that sort of premier second tier of edge rushers, which is a very good place to be because if you're talking about the top, the guys we just talked about, the Micahs, the Myles Garretts, Myles Garrett's, Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, all those guys. There's a handful of those guys and, not enough to go around to all the teams. And then there is this strong second tier of guys that, are right up there in the top 10 in sacks every year. And Mafe has the potential to do that now. Super exciting for Seattle fans. And we got to see Spoon on the blitz too. I'll just throw that in there.
Seahawks, by the way, have a hellacious pass rush overall, 43% pressure rate yesterday, third highest in the NFL. So don't get behind against Seattle, I guess is moral of the story. You're not gonna feel good about that. All right, we're gonna get out of here. Fun week 1 so far. Still have Jets 49ers tonight. Make sure to catch us on Thursday. We're doing a TNF live stream as usual. Every single Thursday night. I think we're going on a half hour before kickoff. So make sure to come by for that. It's Bills Dolphins, right? I think it's the TNF game.
I'm pretty sure, but I will now.
Chat can correct us if it's not Bills Dolphins. I think it was.
It is indeed.
I also
Bills
want to thank
at Dolphins. You are correct. You nailed it.
Hey, look at me. I can actually remember stuff sometimes. I also want to thank all of our executive producers, by the way, Andrew, Connor, Aidan, Liam, and Mike. Would not be able to do this without all of you once again. Hope to see you guys on Thursday night, although some of you, it'll be like 2 a.m. So either way, still hope to see you guys on Thursday night or morning for your specific time zones. I also want to thank Homage. If you want to grab any gear for your favorite team or for Bootleg Football, literally anything you get at Homage using the QR code or the link in the description, whether it's football or NFL merch, college football merch, niche 90s TV shows. They have the licenses for like pretty much everything. But in anything you get on Homage, we get a direct cut of. So it's a great way to indirectly support the show. EJ, do you have anything else before we leave?
Yeah, we're going to be doing giveaways because it's week 1 and we're super excited. So LFG, this is also Homage because our boss, Ryan Reynolds, who owns part of Homage, did all the Deadpool and Wolverine.
Technically our boss, yeah.
Right. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, our boss. And Ryan, if you want to support the show, absolutely open to it. But they did all the Deadpool and Wolverine merch through there. So this is the Wolverine version of that tee. And we've got some exclusive goodies. They came up with a Color Splash hat For New Era, we're going to be giving this beauty away along with some of the t-shirts from their historic NFL line. So be looking for that on social media. We are going to run that contest on, I'm just calling it Twitter. I refuse to call it X. We'll have the details there because it's just easier to run contests. But yeah, I am extremely glad to be back. And it was a super fun week one. I think we've got a great schedule. These Monday recaps, Thursday night live streams, and then our edited pod every week is going to go out on Friday, previewing the next week's action. So you'll see us 3 times a week on Bootleg on YouTube. And yeah, let's fucking go.
Oh my God, EJ cussed. Wow, that's
EJ's
a rare
literally
thing.
wearing an LFG shirt. Come on.
It's like hearing your dad cuss for the first time. You're like, is that allowed?
Dude.
It's like seeing your teacher in the mall after
You've
school.
spent 5 years doing this with me. You are well aware that.
Oh no, you have a mouth like a sailor. I'm just not
That is
used to
correct.
seeing you do it on air.
Yeah, well,
All right,
you know,
I like
we'll
I
talk
like this
about
new side of you.
Yes, exactly.
All right, we're going to get out of here. We'll be back in a few days for the TNF live stream. Hope you guys join us for that. Great week one so far. Football's back. Let's go. See you soon.